this battle needs to be fought on the legal front, but it also needs to be fought in a lot of other ways. And what I think of when you talk, Lee, about like picking where to spend your resources is we can all do that.
7 days into Trump's presidency, he enacted his Muslim ban. And on that night, I joined the protesters that were gathering in Brooklyn. And inside, ACLU lawyer Lee was arguing for an emergency stay of Trump's order. And when he emerged, I was just steps from him, and I could see the expression on his face. And it was this mixture of joy, exhaustion, and just total shock to see these crowds of thousands of people chanting ACLU. And in that moment, I knew this was the film that we needed to make. We needed to be with these guys for the next 3 years as they battled and fought Trump. We had just finished our documentary Wiener, and we were developing different projects. And at that moment, I felt like, okay, this is where we need to be. This is the moment. This is going to be the epicenter of the greatest civil rights battle of our lifetime.
And I'll just add, we knew it was going to be an important story. We knew that this was going to be the center of a lot of what was going to be happening over the next few years. But also, you meet people like this, and there's a kind of, as documentarians, there's a kind of like sort of visceral spark that happens that just when you meet people who have the kind of charisma and dynamic personalities of these incredible lawyers, it's just you kind of can't rest until you tell their story. And that's sort of the feeling that we had.
We have always worked hard. There has always been a lot. I think people think the ACLU is way bigger than it is, and it's bigger than other civil rights organizations, but there's still too many lawyers to do what's necessary in any time. But this has been beyond anything that I've experienced in more than 2 decades at the ACLU, because it's been nonstop. The issues have been enormous, fundamental attacks on civil liberties, but it's also been nonstop. So there's never been a rest period in the entire 3 years. So you definitely feel the exhaustion, you feel the exhilaration when you win, and you just need to find ways to keep going. And I think for all of us, it's when you meet with the clients, that's what keeps you going. As you walk into court, and you feel like, I cannot let these parents down and these children down, that they need to be back together, and that keeps you going. But there is definitely an element of exhaustion. There are times when you definitely feel the weight. And for me, the family separation issue was one of those times where you do feel the weight. You feel the country watching and seeing what's going to happen. And so it definitely wears on you, I think, from that standpoint as well.
It is relentless, and it's exhausting. The last 3 years in particular have been harder in a lot of ways than any other point in my career as a civil rights lawyer, but at the same time, with something new happening every day, some new outrage that we have to respond to, there's also something energizing about it. I feel like there's no more important time to be doing the work that we're doing than right now.
How do you keep yourself from being overwhelmed by what's going on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, one of the things is to not constantly come home and watch the news and so that I'm just getting inundated from every side. But picking our spots and figuring out what to focus on has been a real challenge, I think, for the media as well, for us as well. And I'm not sure there's any real easy answer. But I think those are the most important decisions we're making, maybe day to day, is 5 things happen that day. Which are we going to use our resources to combat? Because we can't combat everything. And so picking our spots and getting the most bang for the buck and what we're doing has been a critical aspect of the last 3 years.
It really seems like it's part of the strategy of this administration to exhaust us by hitting us, attacking civil rights and civil liberties on multiple fronts, multiple times a week, it seems like. But choosing our battles is a huge part of conserving our strength.
I think one of the most important parts of the film is what Dale says at the end when he talks about how hard they're fighting to protect all Americans, but how they can't do it alone, right? That this battle needs to be fought on the legal front, but it also needs to be fought in a lot of other ways. And what I think of when you talk, Lee, about like picking where to spend your resources is we can all do that. I think that for us is a big part of what the film is about, that these are everyday superheroes, but they're made human because you see them with their kids and you see them not knowing how to plug in their cell phones. And you realize that like no matter how flawed you are, you can really make a difference in your world, in your community, in your country. And we all have to do that. We may not all have a legal degree, but we have something. We can give our time, we can give our donations, we have our own skill set, whatever it is, making signs to go to the protest or donating to the organizations you believe in. You have a skill set that can allow you to be the superhero in your own story and how to protect our communities and on the issues that matter most to you. And they are such powerful examples for how to do that. And in their humanity, which our brilliant filmmakers were able to capture, we realize that as they are superheroes, they are also humans. So we just have to figure out, like, what's my superpower? What can I do? I think that's one of the things that's so inspiring about the film. I was watching what was happening in Brooklyn on the news, and I called up, we share agents, actually, and I called our agency and said, like, these lawyers at the ACLU, they are going to be at the front line of everything that matters over the next 4 years. Like, who is on the ground with them? Who is capturing this? Somebody has to be capturing this. And they were like, funny you should ask. The geniuses behind Wiener are interested in doing that. And I was like, I'm on board. So we just kind of found each other and decided that we would do this together.
We had never worked on anything sort of this epic in scope before. And it was a new challenge for us, which was exciting, but it was definitely, this was a marathon, not a sprint. And we were fielding teams following Dale to California and Kansas and Lee down to the border and small towns along the Rio Grande. And I can't even, you'll notice in the film, occasionally you'll hear one of our voices asking a question of the lawyers, just, and it's never the same person because we were spread out. It was exhausting. It was fun, and it was mad. But we loved it.
And just like the lawyers, we would get a tweet, Trump would tweet something, and we would know, oh no, we've got to drop everything, follow you guys, meet up, try to get into your homes, get into the strategy sessions, your vacations, like your vacations are skewed, and we had an amazing, we also had Sean McGing, who is our DP, was everywhere. And Maya Seidler too. So we had a great team who was able to be flexible and nimble.
I would get, a text from Elyse at 11 o'clock at night. Your family wouldn't mind if we pop over now tonight. We just saw that something happened in one of your cases, and it was sort of a little like that.
Yeah, a lot of it.
It's hard to do. I mean, you kind of have to. It's an art, not a science. It's like just sort of keeping up with these guys everywhere that they're going, capturing as much as we can, and then just doing our best to figure out how to weave it together in the end is very challenging.
I think I really enjoy producing because I feel like it's an opportunity to help a bunch of artists and artisans do their best work. I feel like I get to be kind of a cheerleader in some ways and help more stories get told that I think deserve to be told. And at my company, Simpson Street, we're really kind of about centering otherness and sort of changing the way we think about protagonists and reminding us that heroes look like all of us. So I can't think of a better film that embodies that idea than this one. And we're just gonna continue to look for more projects that allow us all to kind of awaken to the potential to be the center of our own stories and the lead of our own lives.
And I just want to say that, it was this like amazing kind of moment where I was there, we said we want to do this, and then like a week later we got a call that Kerry is interested. And when we spoke, it was so energizing for us to have you, to have your enthusiasm, just to know that you were with us rooting, and Pilar, and it just felt like an amazing partnership to really, and this is, as Eli was saying, the scope of this was like nothing we'd ever done. We had to be on many, many fronts, following many different people, sometimes at the same time. So having Kerry supporting us along the way was so energizing and kept us going too.
For the ACLU, what is top of mind right now?
Pick out of a hat.
He's got an argument in the Supreme Court in 2 months. I mean,
I think it's going to be sort of more of the same and maybe even get a little bit worse as we get closer then. And I think one of the things we're trying to figure out is sort of what's going to happen next term. You know, if President Trump is still there, I think it's going to be more of the same and maybe worse, and we're going to be working this way. And then if there's a new president, how to figure out how to unwind stuff. But right now, we're just still in the thick of it. As Dale said, I have a Supreme Court case coming up in 6 weeks, and I'm sure Dale has a million things. It's just right now, there's been no break. And I mean, one of the things that's tricky is you were asking how to sort of pull back and figure out strategy, because day to day you're underwater, and so it's very hard to think about long-term strategy, but we need to do that because it's hard to just keep this pace up day to day.
I mean, I direct our voting rights work. We have maybe the most important presidential election of our lifetimes in 10 months. We've got cases in places like Florida, New Hampshire, with literally the voting rights of hundreds of thousands of people at stake, and you know, any number of emergencies that I'm sure are going to pop up unexpectedly. So we have our work cut out for us.
Yeah. In between these interviews, they're writing briefs. No joke. He was taken out. He was writing briefs.
What is the one thing that our viewers could do to make a difference?
Well, I think this year, voting, because Dale was talking about in our Q&A yesterday that voting is the one right that allows you to have a voice in all of these other battles that are being fought: reproductive rights, mass incarceration, immigrants' rights. When you exercise your right as a voter in the democracy, then you are counted, you are heard. So I think voting and also getting in the fight to secure voting rights across the country right now this year feels like a really strong way to make an impact.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Kerry was saying before, is that everyone has their own strengths and can get involved in particular ways, but the one thing everyone can do is raise their voice and vote. You know, and I'm just echoing again what Kerry said about this sort of larger battle. This is the closest, and I've been here a long time at these, this is the closest we've seen to sort of mirroring a civil rights moment like the 60s. And if you look back to the 60s, what you remember, the court cases were critically important, but what you really remember are the people in the streets protesting. And so I think that's what we need to create now, is that sort of mass kind of movement for civil liberties.
Like, if baking is your thing, bake a bunch of cupcakes, send the money to the ACLU. Like, you have a skill. Whatever your skills are, there's a way to get in this fight.
Right.